My daughter poured her heart into a handmade Christmas gift, only for her favorite uncle to contemptuously toss it into a roaring fire. He thought he was teaching her a lesson about clutter, but all he really did was light the fuse on his own destruction. My daughter, Lily, has a heart made of gold and hands that are constantly creating. For her, the best way to show love isn't to buy something, but to make it. At 10 years old, she's already a little artist, pouring all her time and soul into her projects. So when Christmas was approaching, it was no surprise that she decided to make a very special, handmade gift for her favorite uncle, my brother Mark. I tried to gently steer her towards making something for her grandparents or her dad, but she was insistent. "Uncle Mark is the best," she'd say. "He's so funny and he always gives the coolest presents." The irony of that statement is so thick now, I could choke on it. You have to understand the dynamic here. My family isn't poor, but we live a simple, comfortable life. My husband is a teacher, and I'm a graphic designer who works from home. We value experiences over things. My brother Mark, on the other hand, married into money. His wife Karen comes from a family that owns a chain of luxury car dealerships, and they have never, ever let us forget it. Every family gathering is a showcase for their latest acquisitions: Rolex watches, designer handbags that cost more than my mortgage payment, and endless stories about their trips to Dubai or the Swiss Alps. They aren't just wealthy, they're performatively wealthy, and they look down on our life with a kind of smug pity. Lily, in her innocence, didn't see any of this. She just saw the uncle who would toss her in the air when she was little, and who brought a giant, flashy remote control car for her birthday last year. She didn't understand that the car was less a gift for her and more a statement for the rest of us. Look what I can afford. So for 2 months, our dining room table was Lily's workshop. She found this beautiful plain wooden box at a craft store and decided to turn it into a memory box for Mark. She spent hours sanding it until it was perfectly smooth. She painted it a deep forest green, his favorite color, and then, with a tiny brush and a remarkably steady hand, she painted little gold stars all over it. The real magic, though, was inside. She went through all our old photo albums, picking out pictures of her and Mark. Mark holding her as a baby, the two of them building a sandcastle, a silly selfie she took with his phone at last year's Thanksgiving. She mounted each photo on cardstock and wrote a little caption underneath: "Me and Uncle Mark at the beach, best day ever." She also filled it with little treasures that represented inside jokes between them: a smooth gray stone from a lake they visited, a bottle cap from a specific brand of root beer he likes, even a silly plastic spider from a Halloween they spent together. The thing was a masterpiece of love. Seeing her so dedicated, so full of pure affection for her uncle, made my heart swell. The night before Christmas Eve, she finally finished it. She wrapped it herself in sparkly snowman paper and placed a big, slightly lopsided bow on top. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with pride and anticipation. "Mommy," she whispered, "do you think he's going to love it?" I hugged her tight and said, "Honey, he's going to love it more than anything." I was so wrong. Christmas Eve at my parents' house started as it always did. The smell of roast turkey and pine needles filled the air. My dad had the fire roaring in the hearth, and my mom was bustling around making sure everyone had a drink. Mark and Karen arrived late, of course, making a grand entrance. Karen was draped in a cashmere coat that she dramatically handed off to my mom, while Mark made a big show of placing his perfectly wrapped designer store gifts under the tree. They dwarfed Lily's lumpy, lovingly wrapped present. After dinner, we all gathered in the living room for the gift exchange. Mark and Karen's gifts to everyone were extravagant as usual. A leather-bound first edition for my dad, a ridiculously expensive perfume for my mom, a top-of-the-line drone for my husband. It was all very impressive and completely impersonal. Then it was Mark's turn to open his gifts. He opened a nice bottle of scotch from my parents and a new polo shirt from us, both of which received a polite, if unenthusiastic, "Thanks." Finally, Lily, vibrating with excitement, picked up her gift from under the tree and carried it over to him. "This one's from me, Uncle Mark. I made it myself," she said, her voice filled with pride. Mark took the box from her. He tore off the paper with a casual indifference that already made my stomach clench. He lifted the lid of the wooden box. For a moment, he was silent, just staring down at the contents. Lily was practically holding her breath, her eyes wide, waiting for the explosion of joy she was so sure was coming. Then a slow, condescending smile spread across Mark's face. He looked over at Karen and smirked. He picked up one of the little photos of him and a younger Lily, holding it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were something dirty. "Oh, wow," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "A box of old pictures and rocks. How quaint." The light in Lily's eyes flickered and died. I saw her little shoulders slump. It's a memory box," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, "for all our fun times together." Right, Mark said, setting the picture down and closing the lid with a dismissive snap. He looked around at the rest of us as if letting us all in on a joke. "It's just, we're trying to declutter the house. Marie Kondo and all that." He chuckled, a harsh, grating sound in the suddenly silent room. "This is very sweet, Lily. Very thrifty." He patted the top of the box. "But next time a gift card is just fine." My blood ran cold. I opened my mouth to say something, to tear him to shreds for crushing my daughter's heart. But before I could utter a single word, Mark stood up. He looked at the beautiful, hand-painted box in his hand. Then he looked at the crackling fire in the hearth. A truly awful, calculating look came over his face. "In fact," he said, his voice low and cruel, "I can show you exactly what we do with cheap, sentimental clutter in our house." He took the box in one hand, and with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, he started walking towards the roaring fireplace. The world seemed to slow down. My dad half rose from his armchair, his mouth open in a silent no. My husband David actually took a step forward, his hand outstretched as if he could somehow rewind time by a few seconds. I just stood there, frozen, watching my brother's silhouette against the flickering orange light. He held Lily's precious box over the grate. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look back. With a casual flick of his wrist, he tossed it into the heart of the fire. There was a soft thud as it landed on the blazing logs. For a horrifying second, it just sat there, the deep green paint and gold stars momentarily illuminated by the flames licking at its edges. Then the corner caught. A tiny tongue of fire tasted the wood, and the paint began to blister and blacken. The little photos inside, the smooth stone, the bottle cap, all the carefully curated pieces of my daughter's love for him were being consumed. The smell of burning paint and paper filled the air, a sickeningly sweet and acrid scent that I will never forget. The sound that broke the spell was a tiny, strangled gasp from beside me. I looked down at Lily. Her face was chalk white, her eyes wide with a kind of primal horror a child should never experience. Her mouth was a perfect O of disbelief, and then her face just crumpled. It wasn't a loud, theatrical cry. It was a silent, soul-crushing sob that shook her entire small body. She put her hands over her mouth as if to hold the sound in, her knuckles white. That's what shattered my paralysis. A red wave of fury washed over me, so hot and intense it felt like the fire itself was inside my veins. "What did you do?" I shrieked, my voice cracking. I lunged towards him, but David grabbed my arm, holding me back. Mark turned from the fire, an ugly, self-satisfied smirk on his face. "Relax, Sarah. I'm just teaching her a valuable lesson about the real world. Things are just things. You get attached. You get burned." "A lesson?" David spat, his voice low and dangerous. "She is 10 years old, you sociopath. That was her heart in that box." Karen, who had been watching the whole thing with an air of detached amusement, finally chimed in, her voice like ice chips. "Oh, for heaven's sake, David, don't be so dramatic. It was a tacky craft project. What were we supposed to do with it? Let it collect dust on a shelf? Mark did you both a favor." A favor. The words echoed in the ringing silence of the room. My mother was now weeping softly into her hands, while my father just stood there, looking utterly helpless, torn between his two children. "Mark, son," he mumbled, that wasn't right." "Oh, lighten up, Dad," Mark scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "It's not a big deal. Look, I'll even fix it." He pulled out his wallet, a thick block of expensive leather, and extracted 2 crisp $100 bills. He walked over to Lily, who flinched away from him as if he were a monster. He crouched down, trying to push the money into her clenched fist. "Here, sweetie, go buy yourself a new doll, or that iPad you wanted. See? We'll get you something that's actually worth something." That was it. That was the moment something inside me broke and reformed into something harder, something colder. Lily looked at the money in his hand and then up at his face with so much pain and betrayal in her eyes that it took my breath away. She didn't say a word. She just turned and buried her face in my leg, her small body trembling uncontrollably. I gently pushed her behind me, stepping between her and my brother. "Get away from my daughter," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Don't you ever speak to her again. Don't you ever look at her again." I looked at Mark, at Karen, at my ineffectual parents. The festive room, the twinkling lights, the perfectly decorated tree, it all felt like a mockery. "We're leaving." David was already getting our coats. I scooped Lily up into my arms. She was surprisingly heavy, a dead weight of grief. As we walked to the door, Mark called out, "Oh, come on, Sarah, don't ruin Christmas over a stupid box." I stopped at the doorway and turned back to face him, my eyes burning. "You didn't just ruin Christmas, Mark. You just showed my daughter exactly who you are. And you showed me too. And trust me, we will never, ever forget it." The look on his face shifted from arrogance to a flicker of annoyance, but he still didn't get it. He couldn't. To him, it was just a box. He had no concept of intangible value, of love, of effort. His entire world was built on price tags and brand names. The car ride home was silent save for Lily's quiet, hiccuping breaths as she cried herself to sleep in the back seat. David drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. When we got home, I carried Lily straight to her bed, tucked her in, and sat beside her until her breathing evened out. The sight of her tear-stained cheeks, even in sleep, fueled the cold fire that had ignited inside of me. I went back downstairs to find David staring into our own unlit fireplace. "I could kill him," he whispered. "I swear to God I could actually kill him." "No," I said, my voice as hard as stone. "Killing him is too quick. He wouldn't understand it. He doesn't understand anything that he can't buy or sell." I walked over to my laptop and opened it. A thought, an idea, had been forming in the back of my mind. It was ugly and it was vengeful, but right now, it felt like justice. Mark and Karen's entire identity was built on the foundation of her family's money, their pristine reputation in the luxury car business. They flaunted it, they weaponized it, and they used it to make people like us feel small. "What are you doing?" David asked. "I'm remembering something," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'm remembering a conversation I overheard between Karen and her mother a few years ago. Something they thought no one else heard. Something about a creative solution to a very big tax problem their dealerships were having." A grim smile touched my lips for the first time that night. Mark thinks the most valuable things come with a price tag. He's about to find out that the most expensive things in life are the ones you can't see. And he's about to learn just how high the price of burning my daughter's gift is going to be. The next morning, Christmas Day, was a hollow, silent affair. The pile of presents under our own tree seemed to mock us. Lily came downstairs like a little ghost in her pajamas, her eyes puffy and ringed with a bruised-looking purple. She didn't even look at the gifts. She just sat on the sofa, curled into a tight ball, staring at nothing. David and I tried to coax her, showing her the big box from her grandparents, the one we knew held the dollhouse she'd been dreaming of. She just shook her head, a barely perceptible movement. The light was gone from her. Mark hadn't just burned a box. He had burned a piece of her childhood, a piece of her faith in the people who were supposed to love her. Seeing her like that cemented the ice around my heart. This wasn't just about anger anymore. This was about justice. While David tried his best to gently bring some life back into our daughter, I retreated to my office, the memory of that overheard conversation playing on a loop in my mind. It was about 3 years ago, at Mark and Karen's ridiculously lavish anniversary party. I had gone to the powder room, and on my way back, I'd passed a partially open study door. Karen and her mother were inside, their voices low and sharp. I heard Karen's mother say something about layering the donations through the new charitable foundation in the Caymans. Karen had laughed, a high, brittle sound, and replied, "Well, it's better than paying Uncle Sam 40% to waste it. Besides, the marketing write-offs from the dealership cover the transfer." At the time, it was just rich people noise, words that floated past me. Now, they were a battle plan. My graphic design skills meant I knew my way around the dark corners of the internet far better than my brother or his tech-illiterate in-laws ever would. I started digging. It wasn't easy, but they were arrogant. And arrogance breeds carelessness. Their charitable foundation had a name, one they'd proudly put on the invitations for a gala they'd hosted. A quick search revealed it was registered in the Cayman Islands, a notorious tax haven. The foundation's board of directors, Karen, her mother, and 2 lawyers, whose names I recognized from the dealership's website. It was a closed loop. David found me hours later, surrounded by a web of open browser tabs, my face illuminated by the glow of the screen. "Sarah, what is this?" he asked, his voice heavy with concern. "You look like you're plotting a coup." "Something like that," I said, not taking my eyes off a complex diagram of LLCs I was piecing together. "They're washing money, David, millions of dollars. The dealership donates huge, tax-deductible sums to their own fake offshore charity for marketing services. The charity pays exorbitant consulting fees back to a separate LLC controlled by Karen's mom. It's clean, untaxed money. They're robbing the country blind and using the proceeds to buy designer coats and burn little girls' Christmas presents." David sat down heavily. "Sarah, this is the IRS. This is serious jail time stuff. Are you sure you want to get involved? What if it comes back on us?" "How can it?" I countered, finally turning to look at him. "I'm just a concerned citizen who happened to stumble upon some publicly available information. They're the ones who are criminals. They think they're untouchable, that their money buys them a different set of rules. I'm just going to remind them that it doesn't." I looked towards the living room, where Lily was still sitting, a silent, heartbroken statue. "They hurt our little girl, David. They tried to teach her that love has a price tag and that her love wasn't worth enough. I'm going to teach them what a real, valuable lesson looks like." He saw the look in my eyes and knew there was no arguing. He just sighed and put a hand on my shoulder. "Okay, just be careful." The final piece of the puzzle, the smoking gun, was a stroke of sheer idiotic luck on my part and blinding hubris on theirs. I found a Society Photographer's online gallery from their charity gala in the Caymans. There were dozens of photos of Karen and her family posing with champagne, dripping with jewels. But one photo in the background caught my eye. Pinned to a bulletin board behind the bar was a list of platinum sponsors. At the very top was the name of the car dealership, with a donation amount listed next to it that was frankly astronomical. Right below it was a list of the evening's disbursement recipients, the people the charity was supposedly helping. The top recipient, receiving nearly half the total amount, was the name of the LLC I had already traced back to Karen's mother. They literally posted the proof of their fraud on the wall at their own party. I spent the next 2 days compiling everything into a single, meticulously organized digital dossier. I used my design skills to make it clean, professional, and easy to understand with flowcharts, screenshots, and highlighted documents. It was a work of art, a masterpiece of cold, calculated revenge. I wrote a detailed, anonymous email explaining the scheme in simple terms, attaching my dossier as a PDF. I built a distribution list, 2 well-known investigative journalists at the biggest newspaper in our state, a popular blogger who specialized in exposing corporate corruption, and, for good measure, the direct tip lines for both the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division and the state's Attorney General. On the evening of December 26th, with Lily asleep in her bed, hopefully dreaming of better things, I sat in my silent office, the email open on my screen. All the addresses were loaded. The subject line read, "Anonymous tip, evidence of tax fraud and money laundering at dealership name." My heart was pounding in my chest. This was it. There was no going back from this. One click and their entire shimmering, perfect world would be set on fire. It felt strangely appropriate. An eye for an eye, a fire for a fire. My finger hovered over the mouse, poised over the send button. I thought of the smell of the burning paint, of the look on Lily's face, of Mark's cruel, laughing eyes. This was for her. I took a deep breath, and the cursor moved, resting directly on the word send. I clicked. The whoosh sound of the email leaving my outbox was the quietest, most deafening explosion I had ever heard. For a moment, nothing happened. The world didn't change. Then I shut the laptop, my hand trembling slightly. I went and sat with David in the living room, not saying a word. He knew what I had done. He just took my hand, and we sat there together in the quiet dark. A strange calm washed over me. The fury was gone, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. I had lit the fuse. Now all I had to do was wait for the bang. It took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of agonizing silence, where I second-guessed myself 1,000 times a day. Did I do the right thing? Was I just as cruel as they were? Every time the doubt crept in, I would see Lily. She was slowly coming back to herself. But something was different. The unshakable confidence she once had in the goodness of people was gone, replaced by a new, wary caution. She no longer spoke of her uncle. It was like he had been erased from her memory. That hardened my resolve. This wasn't just for revenge, it was for her. It was to show her that bullies, no matter how rich or powerful, don't always win. The first tremor hit on a Tuesday morning. One of the investigative journalists I'd emailed, a woman with a reputation for sinking her teeth into a story and never letting go, published a bombshell article. The headline was plastered across the front page of the state's biggest news site. Luxury auto empire at center of massive tax fraud investigation. My dossier was the roadmap. The journalist had done her own digging, confirming the shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the whole sordid scheme. She didn't name me, of course, just referring to an anonymous detailed tip from a source close to the family. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The story went viral. That afternoon, news vans were parked outside the flagship dealership and Karen's parents' gated community. By the next day, the Attorney General had announced a formal investigation. The IRS, tight-lipped as ever, simply issued a no comment, which in their world is as good as a confession. My phone started ringing off the hook. My parents, my cousins. Everyone wanted to know if I had seen the news. I played dumb, expressing shock and concern, but then the call I was waiting for came. It was Mark. His number flashed on my screen, and I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a deep, steadying breath. "Hello, Mark," I said, my voice cool and even. "Sarah, you have to help me." He He sounded frantic, his usual smugness completely gone, replaced by a raw, panicked fear. "They're raiding the dealerships. The feds are here. They're talking about freezing our assets. Karen's a wreck. Her father is going to have a heart attack." "That sounds stressful," I said, examining a fingernail with feigned indifference. "Stressful? It's a catastrophe. This article, it talks about a family source. They think it was you. Did you do this, Sarah? Did you tell them something?" I paused, letting him hang in the silence. "Mark," I began, my voice dropping low, "do you remember Christmas Eve? Do you remember my daughter's face when you held her gift over the fire?" There was a confused silence on the other end. "What? The box? What does that have to do with anything? This is my life we're talking about." And there it was. He still didn't get it. He never would. "You thought her gift was cheap, Mark. You thought her love, her time, her effort. It was all worthless clutter. You wanted to teach her a lesson about what has real value in the world." I could hear sirens wailing faintly in the background of his call. "Well, consider this my lesson to you. You built your entire world on a foundation of dirty money. You flaunted it. You looked down on us for our simple life, and you used your wealth to be cruel. Now that entire world is on fire, and you're about to find out exactly what it feels like to watch everything you love turn to ash." I hung up. I didn't wait for a reply. I blocked his number, Karen's, and my parents' for good measure. They had stood by and watched him break my daughter's heart. Their silence had made them complicit. Over the next few months, the empire crumbled. The dealerships were seized. Karen's father and mother were indicted on multiple counts of tax evasion and money laundering. Mark and Karen, whose entire lifestyle was funded by the family business, were left with nothing. Their mansion went into foreclosure. The designer cars were repossessed. The last I heard from a cousin who couldn't resist passing on the gossip was that they were living in a small rented apartment, and Mark was working as a junior salesman at a rival, much less glamorous car dealership. He was finally learning what it was like to earn an honest dollar. The best part, the true resolution, came one sunny Saturday afternoon. Lily and I were in the backyard. She had a new wooden box, and she was painting it, this time for herself. She was humming a happy little tune, completely absorbed in her art. She had painted it bright yellow with big, cheerful sunflowers all over it. She looked up at me and smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, the first one I'd seen in a long time. "Mommy," she said, "do you think it's pretty?" "I think it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," I said, and my voice didn't even crack. I sat down on the grass beside her, watching her carefully place a small, smooth stone inside. The fire hadn't destroyed her creative spirit. It had just burned away the people who didn't deserve to be a part of it. Her heart, made of gold, was still creating. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that she had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that the things you make with love are priceless, and no one, no matter how rich or powerful, can ever truly burn them.